So I'm here with Max Schrems, who's one of our award winners tonight, and really just wanted to ask you some questions to give some insight into all the great things you've done, which why we're giving you the award tonight. You were, I think up until last year, you were a law student, and the work that we're talking about tonight, these challenges of Facebook, were undertaken whilst you were a law student. I gather that's quite unusual. I mean, when you're a student of the law, you're often expected very much to sort of follow it to the letter and learn about it, not sort of use it to make significant challenges. So what was it that spurred you to act?
Oh, I always saw law as more as a political thing
Okay.
in the end than really like law studies. I never really wanted to become a lawyer. So
Okay.
To me, what was always more interesting what's right and wrong and how the system works and everything. Mm-hmm. And it all kind of started out with a Facebook guy giving a speech in Santa Clara, the university in the US where I was studying for half a year. And he was telling us the most obscure things about germ-free and privacy law. So I was like, that's not right. And from that on, I got my data, and they made the big mistake to actually send it all to me. Mm-hmm. And so we could actually prove that they're in a lot of ways not adhering to European law. And then it was more of an experiment of... kind of in the sense of usually with law you don't have experiments, but in that case you could by just claiming your rights and see what happens. And that's interesting how big it became that someone has finally claimed his right to privacy, because we're all talking about it, and a lot of the research goes on between data protection commissioners and the companies and all that kind of stuff, but the user is hardly in the picture. And that was kind of interesting in that case, I guess.
And obviously, initially it was just you acting sort of single-handedly, but you then established a sort of campaign during the Facebook versus Europe campaign. And how many people now do you know are sort of active contributing to that?
It's me and about 5 different friends.
Okay.
So it's really teeny tiny small. That's the reason why it also works quite well, because you kind of call each other and arrange things that way. And we always wanted it to be more of a kind of couple of citizens getting together, not real NGO. However, we kind of got the feeling now that there is a desperate need for kind of privacy enforcement NGO. We do have a lot of privacy NGOs that do a lot of interesting like policy work and talk, but then in the end we all go home and complain about how bad it is, and there's very little enforcement in Europe. So what I think that's the long time thing we could possibly get out of that project is to have some kind of a continuous privacy enforcement in Europe.
Okay.
But that's down the road.
That's a few steps away. What did your tutor think of this, by the way, when you were doing this? Were they very supportive?
Actually, in Vienna Law School is just so big that you hardly talk to your teachers. Plus, Viennese people are not talking to each other in general, so no one at law school ever talked to me other than the book salesperson. He was like, "Aren't you the Facebook guy?" But that's a very Viennese thing, I guess, in the end. As far as I've heard, the Facebook people have not given another speech at Santa Clara University.
Right. As one might expect.
It might have been one of the more expensive speeches there.
So you obviously, I mean, to get back to the sort of serious question, you sort of gone through fairly sort of long, extended, sort of legal case. What's come out of it at the other end? What do you think has been achieved?
I think there are two parts. On the one side, we got a lot of things through, like them turning off their facial recognition or having shorter retention periods or new privacy policies and stuff. The other thing, and might be the more interesting thing, is that we failed for 80% of what we claimed, even though it was really basic claims, because of the Irish DPC just not being interested in enforcing anything. They lack resources, especially on the level of having educated people technically and legally. And that is actually even more interesting on a political scale, that triggered then, especially on the European Union reform now for data protection, that became a model case of, look at that guy in Ireland and they see it doesn't work. I think that helped a whole lot too for the discussion. It's interesting, I'm oftentimes at conferences or hearings where they don't even know I'm sitting there, and sure enough they come up with that example. And I think that was actually not achieving it or not being able to go through with it is actually in the end the bigger impact than if you can do it in the end.
No, I suppose you're right in terms of sort of, achieving media coverage and public interest in a way that it's probably more useful. I mean, in a way, I suppose that's what we were most interested in your case, was the sort of the fact that you'd stimulate this huge public debate about what privacy means in the digital era, and also specifically for maybe your age group actually. So there is this question about whether or not privacy is a matter of legal right. or whether actually, we should think about it more as a matter of social norms. And if actually we live in a society where we all publish all this information about ourselves so happily on these websites, well, what does privacy mean, and why does it matter? But I mean, why do you still think that conversation is so important to have?
I think the biggest issue is, are you deciding what's published about you? Just
Right.
from the fact that a lot of people are publishing doesn't mean that you want to publish all your stuff. And that's generally to have the right to publish your stuff, but also have the right to not publish other things. It's something we're gonna retain. Otherwise, I doubt that we can have trust in all these technologies. And that's what I see mostly, and that's what I'm always afraid that whenever there's media coverage, you get 10 emails next day saying, I'm off Facebook now after I know what they're doing. And that's totally not the solution, but that's where we're heading. It's like either you have to do whatever they want to do, especially because we have monopolies in these markets usually, or you just offline, and that can't really be the solution. However, we're just at the very beginning of the discussion. I oftentimes say it's pretty much like environmentalist law in the 60s or something, where we're restarting it somehow. But if we give up too early, it's very likely that there's not going to be too much law in the future.
You've also sort of broadened your gaze, haven't you, a little bit in sort of recent months with the Edward Snowden revelations, and obviously you're not taking on the NSA, but you are, aren't you, also sort of looking at the companies that handed over data. That's a sort of slightly different case, isn't it? So that's again a matter of sort of privacy in terms of the information that we give to these companies, but presumably the relationship they have with the state is a very complex issue. They don't have the choice as to what they hand over or don't hand over, presumably. Yeah,
and what we do see there to a certain extent is that we have kind of a privatization of surveillance. So first you have a private company taking all the information. The government is not putting up the bad cameras anymore, but private companies are, and then the government is taking it afterwards. And that's kind of where that thing runs in. And we had these 5 complaints against different companies that hand over data under this whole safe harbor agreement. That is a problematic thing anyways. And we saw the chance in that case to finally get it to the ECJ, at least one of the 3 countries. So it was another thing where you really see that you can have very little. Writing up a complaint like that pretty much takes you a day or 2, but you can have massive discussion after it, and if, for example, the DPC has the possibility to have a case in front of them, they could possibly make something out of it. While we're generally more discussing about it, it's interesting how we have 100 more articles about it than factual legal cases. So that was the same thing there, I guess.
Where do you think this is going to go? I mean, if we look at some of the recent sort of companies like, say, DuckDuckGo or Snapchat and so on, which are tools which try and encourage social media use, but still leave sort of privacy rights left with individual users. I mean, do you think we'll ever see the same with sort of social media like sort of Facebook and so on?
I do think we could see the same thing with social media. The big problem is that we have a closed network. If that would be open in any way, and that would be something that the law has to do in the end, it's pretty much like telecom networks in the US 100 years ago, where suddenly government had to come up and say, you got to open up your networks, otherwise this is not a free market and not a competition. And that's actually, if there would be an open social network, I think we would have seen these solutions already, and I think Facebook would be dead already. Not just because of privacy, but also because of 100 other things. The problem is that we really face monopolies in these markets right now, and there is a huge market failure in the end that then has the backdrop of privacy and other concerns as well.
Well, you're doing really, really great work, and the issues you're raising are so thought-provoking. So thank you so much for taking time to do this tonight. Thank you.